How the elite use Stoicism to build an unbreakable mind. When Jeff Bezos was asked about the worst day in Amazon's history, when the company lost 94% of its stock value during the dot-com crash, he didn't talk about panic or sleepless nights. Instead, he calmly explained how he focused only on what he could control: customer satisfaction and long-term thinking. This wasn't natural talent or lucky genetics. Tim Cook practices it every morning before dawn. Warren Buffett credits it for his investment success spanning 7 decades. Navy SEALs are trained in its principles before their first mission. What am I talking about? Stoicism. But not the watered-down Instagram quote version you've seen. I'm talking about the real psychological technology that turns ordinary minds into unbreakable ones. Today, I'm going to reveal exactly how the elite use Stoic principles backed by modern neuroscience and cognitive psychology to develop what researchers call stress inoculation and cognitive flexibility. You'll discover why this ancient philosophy is actually the most advanced form of mental training we have, and how you can use the same techniques that billionaires, world leaders, and peak performers rely on to build an unbreakable mind. But first, let me tell you about a study that will completely change how you think about mental strength. Dr. Martin Seligman from the University of Pennsylvania conducted research with the U.S. Army, testing soldiers before they deployed to combat zones. What he found was shocking. The soldiers, who naturally thought like Stoics, were 25% less likely to develop PTSD, had 40% better performance under extreme stress, and showed measurable differences in brain structure after just 6 months of training. This isn't philosophy, it's neuroscience. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to rewire your brain the same way the elite do. Scientific disclaimer: this video is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical or psychological treatment. Mental health is complex and influenced by numerous factors including genetics, environment, and individual circumstances. The techniques discussed are based on research but should not replace professional mental health care. If you're experiencing depression, anxiety, or other mental health concerns, please consult with qualified healthcare professionals. Individual results may vary, and what works for some people may not work for others. The neuroscience of mental resilience. Before we dive into how the elite use Stoicism, you need to understand what actually happens in your brain when you build mental resilience. For decades, psychologists thought some people were just naturally tougher. But groundbreaking research from Stanford, Harvard, and the University of Pennsylvania has revealed something extraordinary. Mental strength isn't born, it's built, and it follows predictable patterns that can be measured, trained, and optimized. Dr. Amy Arnsten from Yale School of Medicine made a discovery that changed everything we know about stress and performance. Using advanced brain imaging, she found that when we experience stress, the prefrontal cortex, the brain's CEO responsible for rational decision-making, literally goes offline. Blood flow redirects to the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, triggering what she calls amygdala hijack. This is why smart people make terrible decisions under pressure, why successful people crumble during crises, and why most people's minds become their worst enemy when it matters most. But here's where it gets interesting. Arnsten discovered that certain individuals show a completely different brain pattern under stress. Instead of prefrontal cortex shutdown, they maintain higher executive function, better working memory, and superior decision-making capacity. When she studied these individuals, she found they all shared specific thinking patterns that directly correspond to Stoic principles developed 2,000 years ago. Dr. Richard Davidson from the University of Wisconsin took this research further, using fMRI brain scans. He studied what he calls psychological resilience and found that resilient individuals have measurably different brain structures. Their anterior cingulate cortex, responsible for attention and emotional regulation, is more developed. Their insula, which processes internal body signals, shows greater connectivity. Most importantly, their default mode network, the brain's idle state, shows patterns associated with focused attention rather than rumination and worry. The revolutionary discovery. These brain differences aren't genetic. They're the result of specific mental training that strengthens neural pathways exactly like physical exercise strengthens muscles. Dr. Davidson's lab proved that just 8 weeks of targeted cognitive training can create measurable changes in brain structure, increases in gray matter density, and improvements in stress resilience that lasts for years. Dr. Martin Seligman's research with the U.S. Army revealed the practical implications. The Master Resilience Training Program, based on cognitive psychology principles that mirror Stoic practices, was implemented across 1.1 million soldiers. The results were staggering. 25% reduction in anxiety disorders, 34% decrease in depression rates, 21% improvement in overall psychological fitness, and most remarkably, soldiers who completed the training showed better performance in combat situations and faster recovery from traumatic experiences. But perhaps the most important discovery came from Dr. Carol Dweck at Stanford University. Her research on mindset revealed that how we think about challenges, setbacks, and abilities directly influences our brain's capacity for growth and adaptation. People with what she calls a growth mindset show increased neuroplasticity, better stress recovery, and higher performance across every domain tested. When you examine the core principles of growth mindset, they align perfectly with Stoic philosophy. Dr. Barbara Fredrickson from UNC discovered that positive emotions don't just make us feel good. They literally broaden our cognitive capacity and build psychological resources over time. Her broaden and build theory shows that emotions like gratitude, acceptance, and perspective, central to Stoic practice, create upward spirals of mental strength and resilience. Here's what's truly shocking. Modern neuroscience has confirmed that ancient Stoic practices are actually the most effective methods for developing what researchers call stress inoculation, cognitive reappraisal, and emotional regulation. The elite haven't just stumbled upon these principles. They've systematically applied scientifically validated mental training that most people never learn. Dr. Kevin Oxner from Columbia University's research on cognitive reappraisal, the ability to reframe situations in less threatening ways, shows that this single skill predicts success in leadership, relationships, and personal satisfaction more than IQ, education, or background. And cognitive reappraisal is essentially the core practice of Stoicism translated into modern psychological terms. The brain science is clear. Mental resilience follows specific patterns, can be systematically developed, and creates measurable advantages in every area of life. The elite understand this and have built their minds accordingly. Now, you can too. The elite's secret mental operating system. When most people encounter problems, their minds immediately jump to what's wrong, what they can't control, and why the situation is unfair. But the elite operate with a completely different mental framework, one that's been refined over centuries and validated by modern psychology. They've essentially installed a different operating system in their minds, and the results are extraordinary. Warren Buffett, worth over $100 billion, has faced numerous market crashes, economic recessions, and investment failures. Yet he's never had a losing 20-year period and continues to outperform markets decade after decade. When asked about his secret, he doesn't mention complex financial strategies. Instead, he talks about his inner scorecard versus outer scorecard, focusing on what he can control rather than market fluctuations he cannot. This is pure Stoicism applied to investing, and it's made him one of the wealthiest people in history. Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, starts every day at 4:30 a.m. with what he calls preparation time. During a Harvard Business School interview, he revealed that he spends this time mentally rehearsing potential challenges, visualizing optimal responses, and focusing his attention on Apple's mission rather than external pressures. This practice, which Cook credits for his calm leadership during crises, directly mirrors the Stoic practice of premeditatio malorum, or negative visualization. Admiral James Stockdale spent 7 years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam, enduring torture and solitary confinement. Not only did he survive, he led other prisoners and maintained his sanity through what he later called Stoic principles. After his release, he explained that Stoicism gave him an unshakable internal foundation that external circumstances couldn't destroy. His experience became the basis for what psychologists now call post-traumatic growth and inspired decades of research on mental resilience. But it's not just individual success stories. Dr. James Gross from Stanford University studied what he calls emotional regulation strategies among top performers across industries. Fortune 500 CEOs, Olympic athletes, Navy SEALs, emergency room doctors, and championship coaches. What he found was remarkable. Despite different backgrounds and professions, they all used virtually identical mental frameworks that correspond precisely to Stoic principles. The first pattern Gross identified is what psychologists call cognitive reappraisal. Instead of trying to suppress negative emotions or avoid difficult situations, elite performers consistently reframe challenges as opportunities for growth, setbacks as valuable information, and obstacles as tests of character. This isn't positive thinking or denial. It's a sophisticated mental skill that changes how the brain processes stress and adversity. Dr. Angela Duckworth's research on grit at the University of Pennsylvania revealed that high achievers don't have fewer problems or easier lives. Instead, they have what she calls passion and perseverance for long-term goals. When you examine the specific mental habits that create grit, they align perfectly with Stoic practices, focusing on process rather than outcomes, maintaining long-term perspective during short-term difficulties, and finding meaning in struggle itself. The second pattern is what researchers call values-based decision-making. Dr. Russ Harris, who developed acceptance and commitment therapy, found that psychologically healthy individuals consistently make decisions based on their core values rather than immediate emotions or external pressures. They ask, what kind of person do I want to be, rather than what will make me feel good right now. This creates what psychologists call psychological flexibility and is fundamental to both modern therapy and ancient Stoicism. Reid Hoffman, founder of LinkedIn and one of Silicon Valley's most successful investors, has spoken extensively about how he approaches business decisions. Instead of trying to predict the future or control outcomes, he focuses on making optimal decisions with available information, accepting uncertainty as inevitable, and learning quickly from results. This approach, which he calls intelligent risk-taking, enabled him to build multiple billion-dollar companies and is essentially applied Stoicism in entrepreneurship. The third pattern elite performers share is what Dr. Viktor Frankl called meaning-making. In his research with Holocaust survivors, Frankl discovered that individuals who found meaning in their suffering were more likely to survive and thrive afterward. Modern research by Dr. Crystal Park at the University of Connecticut confirms that people who can extract meaning from adversity show greater psychological growth, better physical health, and higher life satisfaction. This capacity for meaning-making is central to Stoic philosophy and appears to be trainable through specific mental practices. Oprah Winfrey, who overcame poverty, abuse, and discrimination to become one of the most influential people in media, has frequently discussed her mental approach to adversity. She describes a practice of asking, "What is this teaching me? And how can I use this experience to help others, rather than why is this happening to me?" This reframing, which she credits for her resilience, transforms victimhood into empowerment and is a core Stoic principle. What's remarkable is that these elite individuals often developed these mental patterns independently, through trial and error, intense pressure, or mentorship. They discovered, through experience, what ancient Stoics codified as philosophical principles, and what modern psychology has validated as evidence-based practices for mental health and performance optimization. The elite's secret isn't superior genetics, better education, or lucky circumstances. It's a mental operating system that processes reality differently, responds to challenges more effectively, and maintains psychological equilibrium under pressure. And this operating system can be learned, practiced, and mastered by anyone willing to do the mental work. The dichotomy of control. The single most powerful principle that separates the elite from everyone else isn't wealth, connections, or talent. It's their mastery of what Stoics called the dichotomy of control and what modern psychology calls locus of control. This principle is so fundamental that Dr. Julian Rotter's research showed it predicts success in relationships, careers, health, and life satisfaction better than intelligence, education, or socioeconomic background. The principle is deceptively simple. At any moment, everything in your reality falls into one of two categories: things you can control and things you cannot control. Your thoughts, your actions, your decisions, and your responses are within your control. Everything else, including other people's behavior, market conditions, natural disasters, and outcomes of your efforts, is outside your control. The elite have trained themselves to focus 100% of their mental energy on what they can control and accept. Everything else as information rather than problems. Dr. Albert Bandura's research at Stanford University on self-efficacy revealed why this distinction is so powerful. People who believe they have control over their lives show measurably better performance, lower stress levels, and greater persistence in the face of obstacles. But here's the key: it's not about having more control over external circumstances. It's about recognizing and maximizing the control you do have while releasing attachment to what you cannot influence. Jeff Bezos demonstrated this principle during Amazon's most challenging period. In 2000, the company's stock price dropped from $107 to $7 per share. Investors were panicking, media was predicting bankruptcy, and employees were leaving for seemingly safer companies. Instead of focusing on stock prices, market sentiment, or competitor actions, all outside his control, Bezos concentrated entirely on what he could control: customer experience, operational efficiency, and long-term strategy. He famously said, "I knew that if we could keep our composure and focus on the right things, customers would reward us." Amazon's stock eventually reached over $3,000 per share, making it one of the most valuable companies in history. But this isn't just business success. Dr. Suzanne Kobasa's research on psychological hardiness found that individuals who maintain health and performance under extreme stress all share one characteristic: they focus on their response to events rather than trying to control the events themselves. Her studies of executives during corporate restructuring, soldiers in combat, and athletes in competition revealed that hardy individuals consistently ask, "What can I do about this?" rather than "Why is this happening to me?" The neuroscience behind this principle is fascinating. Dr. Amy Arnsten's research at Yale showed that when we focus on things outside our control, it triggers the brain's threat detection system, flooding the prefrontal cortex with stress chemicals and impairing decision-making capacity. However, when we redirect attention to areas where we have agency, it activates the brain's reward system and enhances cognitive function. Simply shifting focus from external circumstances to internal responses literally changes brain chemistry. Navy SEALs are trained in a technique called compartmentalization that applies this principle in life-or-death situations. When facing enemy fire, equipment failure, or mission complications, they're taught to immediately categorize information. What can I control right now? This might be their breathing, their position, their next tactical decision. Everything else becomes background information that doesn't receive emotional energy. This training enables them to maintain peak performance under the most extreme stress possible. Tennis champion Serena Williams demonstrated this principle throughout her career. In her autobiography, she describes how she learned to focus solely on her preparation, effort, and tactical decisions during matches rather than opponent behavior, crowd reactions, or referee calls. She writes, "I realized that my power came from controlling what I could control perfectly, not from trying to control what I couldn't." This mental approach contributed to her becoming one of the greatest athletes in history. Dr. Viktor Frankl's research with concentration camp survivors revealed the ultimate application of this principle. In situations where people had no control over their physical circumstances, those who survived and maintained psychological health focused intensely on the one thing no external force could control: their internal response to circumstances. Frankl wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, the ability to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." The practical application of this principle requires what psychologists call cognitive discipline. Dr. Susan David's research at Harvard Medical School on emotional agility shows that mentally strong individuals consistently practice redirecting attention from external events to internal responses. When faced with criticism, they focus on what they can learn rather than the critic's motivations. When experiencing setbacks, they focus on next actions rather than past decisions. When dealing with difficult people, they focus on their own behavior rather than trying to change others. What makes this principle so powerful is its universal applicability. Whether you're dealing with relationship conflicts, career challenges, health issues, or financial stress, the fundamental choice remains the same. Focus on what you can control or waste energy on what you cannot. The elite have trained themselves to make this choice automatically, creating what researchers call stress resilience and psychological flexibility. Warren Buffett's investment philosophy exemplifies this principle. He focuses entirely on factors within his control: research quality, decision-making processes, and portfolio management. He completely ignores market predictions, economic forecasts, and short-term price fluctuations because they're outside his influence. This approach has generated average annual returns of 20% over 6 decades, far exceeding market averages. The dichotomy of control isn't just a mental exercise, it's a practical technology for optimizing human performance under any conditions. It redirects finite mental energy toward maximum impact, reduces stress by eliminating futile resistance to unchangeable circumstances, and creates the psychological foundation for sustained high performance that characterizes truly elite individuals: emotional regulation and stress inoculation. The difference between ordinary minds and elite minds isn't the absence of negative emotions. It's the sophisticated systems they've developed for managing those emotions under pressure. What most people don't realize is that emotional regulation is a learnable skill, and the elite have essentially turned themselves into psychological athletes through specific training methods that mirror Olympic preparation. Dr. James Gross from Stanford University's research on emotion regulation reveals that people use to fundamentally different strategies when dealing with difficult emotions. The first, called emotion suppression, involves trying to hide or push down feelings after they arise. The second, called cognitive reappraisal, involves changing how you think about the situation before emotions become overwhelming. His studies show that people who use cognitive reappraisal have better relationships, higher job performance, lower stress levels, and significantly better physical health over time. The elite have mastered cognitive reappraisal to an extraordinary degree. When Elon Musk was asked how he handles the constant criticism and setbacks involved in building revolutionary companies like Tesla and SpaceX, he described a mental process that's pure cognitive reappraisal. I try to see criticism as free consulting. Someone is telling me information about how to improve, even if they're saying it in an unconstructive way. The emotion I feel doesn't matter as much as the information I can extract. This isn't natural talent, it's trained skill. Dr. Kevin Oxner's research at Columbia University using brain imaging shows that cognitive reappraisal actually changes neural activity in real time. When people reframe negative situations, activity decreases in the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, and increases in the prefrontal cortex, the brain's CEO. With practice, this process becomes automatic, creating what researchers call emotional flexibility. But the elite go beyond basic emotional regulation. They practice what psychologists call stress inoculation, deliberately exposing themselves to manageable levels of stress to build psychological antibodies against larger challenges. Dr. Richard Deanspear's research on toughness training found that individuals who regularly experience moderate stressors develop better stress tolerance, faster recovery times, and improved performance under extreme pressure. Tim Grover, who trained Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, and other elite athletes, describes a systematic approach to stress inoculation he calls pressure training. Instead of avoiding difficult situations, champions seek them out during practice so they're prepared for competition. Jordan famously insisted on practicing game-winning shots with crowd noise, trash talk, and artificial pressure because he knew games would only be more intense. This mental rehearsal created neural pathways that activated automatically during actual competition. The military has formalized this approach through what they call stress exposure training. Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, and other special forces units deliberately practice skills under physical and psychological stress that exceeds what they'll face in combat. Dr. Bruce Siddle's research on stress and performance shows that skills practiced under high stress are retained better and accessed more reliably during actual emergencies. Warren Buffett applies stress inoculation to investing through a practice he calls mental models. Instead of avoiding market volatility, he studies historical crashes, recessions, and financial crises to understand how markets behave under extreme conditions. He says, "I try to be greedy when others are fearful, because I've already mentally rehearsed these situations. When everyone else is panicking, I'm executing plans I've already thought through." Dr. Ann Maston's research on resilience at the University of Minnesota revealed that people who thrive under adversity don't avoid negative experiences. They develop what she calls adaptive systems for processing them. These systems include meaning-making capacity, social support networks, and most importantly, confidence in their ability to handle whatever comes. This confidence isn't blind optimism, It's based on evidence from successfully navigating previous challenges. The elite also practice what psychologists call emotional granularity, the ability to distinguish between subtle emotional states rather than experiencing vague negative feelings. Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett's research at Northeastern University shows that people who can precisely identify their emotions have better emotional regulation, make better decisions under stress, and recover faster from setbacks. Instead of feeling bad, they recognize the difference between frustration, disappointment, anxiety, and anger, allowing for more targeted responses. Oprah Winfrey demonstrates this principle in how she handles public criticism and business setbacks. Rather than defending against negative emotions, she practices what she calls feeling through experiences. She asks herself specific questions. What exactly am I feeling? Where is this coming from? What is this teaching me about myself or the situation? This emotional precision allows her to extract maximum learning from difficult experiences while maintaining psychological equilibrium. The elite also understand that emotional regulation isn't about becoming emotionless. It's about emotional intelligence and choice. Dr. Peter Salovey's research at Yale University on emotional intelligence shows that high performers don't have fewer emotions. They have better relationships with their emotions. They use feelings as information rather than commands, maintaining what researchers call psychological flexibility under changing conditions. Perhaps most importantly, the elite practice what Dr. Kristin Neff calls self-compassion rather than self-criticism when they experience setbacks or negative emotions. Her research shows that self-compassionate individuals have better emotional regulation, higher motivation, and greater resilience than people who are harsh with themselves. Instead of adding shame to already difficult emotions, they treat themselves with the same kindness they'd show a good friend facing similar challenges. This approach to emotional regulation creates what Dr. Martin Seligman calls learned optimism, the ability to maintain hope, and motivation even during difficult circumstances. It's not about positive thinking or denying reality. It's about developing sophisticated mental skills for processing any experience in ways that preserve psychological resources and enable continued high performance. The practice of memento mori and negative visualization, one of the most counterintuitive practices that separates elite minds from ordinary thinking, is their systematic contemplation of loss, failure, and mortality. While most people avoid thinking about negative possibilities, the elite deliberately practice what Stoics called memento mori, remember death, and premeditatio malorum, negative visualization. Modern psychology has validated these practices as some of the most effective methods for building mental resilience and maintaining perspective during both success and adversity. Dr. Julie Noram's research at Wellesley College on defensive pessimism revealed something surprising about high achievers. Many of them regularly imagine worst-case scenarios not to become pessimistic, but to mentally prepare for challenges and increase their appreciation for current circumstances. Her studies show that people who practice controlled negative visualization perform better under pressure, make more thorough preparations, and experience less anxiety when problems actually occur. Steve Jobs demonstrated this principle throughout his career at Apple. after being diagnosed with cancer. He spoke about how contemplating mortality clarified his priorities and decision-making. He said, "Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart." This wasn't morbid thinking. It was using awareness of life's temporary nature to make bolder, more authentic choices. The neuroscience behind negative visualization is fascinating. Dr. Tali Sharot's research at UCL shows that when people imagine potential negative outcomes in a controlled way, it activates the brain's planning and problem-solving networks without triggering the anxiety responses associated with actual threats. This mental rehearsal creates neural pathways for handling difficulties before they occur, essentially building psychological muscle memory for resilience. Navy SEALs are trained in a technique called visualization under stress, where they mentally rehearse mission failures, equipment malfunctions, and life-threatening scenarios. This isn't to create fear, but to develop automatic responses and maintain calm decision-making when actual emergencies occur. Dr. Bruce Siddle's research shows that individuals who have mentally rehearsed negative scenarios perform 40% better in actual crisis situations than those who only imagine success. Warren Buffett practices negative visualization in his investment decisions through what he calls margin of safety. Before making any investment, he imagines scenarios where the company could fail, markets could crash, or his analysis could be wrong. This mental exercise leads him to only invest in companies that would remain profitable even in worst-case scenarios. He says, "Risk comes from not knowing what you're doing, but it also comes from not imagining what could go wrong." The practice of memento mori, regularly contemplating mortality, has been shown to have profound psychological benefits. Dr. Tom Pashinsky's terror management theory. Research demonstrates that people who develop healthy relationships with mortality live more authentically, make decisions based on personal values rather than social pressure, and experience greater life satisfaction. Instead of denying death's inevitability, they use it as motivation for meaningful action. Tim Cook has spoken about how Steve Jobs taught him to regularly consider the temporary nature of life and success. Cook describes a practice of asking himself, "If this were my last year at Apple, what would I focus on?" This perspective helps him prioritize long-term value creation over short-term stock performance and maintains his focus on Apple's mission during both criticism and praise. Dr. Sonia Lubomirsky's research at UC Riverside on hedonic adaptation explains why negative visualization is so powerful for maintaining life satisfaction. Humans naturally adapt to positive circumstances, taking good things for granted over time. However, people who regularly imagine losing what they have maintain higher appreciation and gratitude for their current circumstances. This prevents what researchers call hedonic treadmill, where increasing success doesn't lead to increased happiness. The practice also builds what psychologists call psychological immunity. Dr. Daniel Gilbert's research at Harvard shows that people overestimate both the intensity and duration of future negative emotions. By regularly imagining difficulties, the elite develop realistic expectations about adversity and confidence in their ability to handle whatever occurs. This creates emotional stability during both good times and challenging periods. Jeff Bezos demonstrated this principle when Amazon faced multiple existential threats during its early years. Instead of avoiding thoughts about potential failure, he regularly considered scenarios where Amazon could be disrupted or destroyed by competitors. This mental exercise led to innovations in cloud computing, artificial intelligence, and logistics that kept Amazon ahead of threats that eliminated other companies. He says, "If you're not willing to be misunderstood for long periods of time, you can't have an original idea." The elite also use negative visualization for decision-making through what researchers call prospective hindsight. Dr. Gary Klein's research shows that people who imagine future failure scenarios make better current decisions because they can identify potential problems before they occur. This mental time travel allows for course corrections that prevent many difficulties from materializing. Perhaps most importantly, these practices create what Dr. Viktor Frankl called tragic optimism, the ability to maintain hope and meaning even while acknowledging life's difficulties and uncertainties. This isn't denial or positive thinking. It's a sophisticated psychological skill that allows for authentic engagement with reality, while preserving motivation and mental health. The elite understand that contemplating negative possibilities isn't pessimism, it's preparation. It's mental conditioning that builds resilience, maintains perspective, and enables optimal performance under any circumstances. By making friends with uncertainty and mortality, they develop unshakable psychological foundations that external circumstances cannot destroy. Building your unbreakable mind. Now comes the practical application. How do you systematically build the same mental resilience that characterizes elite performers? The research is clear that these aren't innate talents, but learnable skills that follow specific training principles. Just like physical fitness requires consistent exercise targeting different muscle groups, mental fitness requires systematic practice of cognitive skills that strengthen psychological resilience over time. The foundation of mental training begins with what Dr. John Kabat-Zinn calls mindful awareness, the ability to observe your thoughts and emotions without being overwhelmed by them. His research at UMass Medical School shows that just 8 weeks of mindfulness practice creates measurable changes in brain structure, including increased gray matter in areas associated with emotional regulation and decreased activity in the default mode network associated with rumination and worry. Start with a daily practice that Dr. Rick Hansen calls taking in the good. For 5 minutes each morning, deliberately focus your attention on things within your control for that day. Your effort level, your attitude, your responses to whatever occurs. This isn't positive thinking. It's attention training that strengthens neural pathways associated with agency and empowerment, rather than helplessness and reactivity. The elite practice systematic stress exposure through what Dr. Stephen Hayes calls psychological flexibility training. Instead of avoiding difficult emotions or challenging situations, they gradually expose themselves to manageable levels of discomfort while practicing optimal responses. This might mean having difficult conversations they've been avoiding, taking on projects slightly beyond their comfort zone, or engaging with criticism constructively rather than defensively. Implement the dichotomy of control through a simple daily practice. When you encounter any stressor, immediately ask, What aspects of this situation can I control? Write down specific actions you can take. Then ask, what aspects are outside my control? Practice accepting these elements as information rather than problems. Dr. Albert Ellis's research shows that people who consistently make this distinction show measurable improvements in anxiety levels, decision-making quality, and overall life satisfaction within 6 weeks. Build emotional granularity by expanding your emotional vocabulary. Instead of feeling good or bad, practice identifying specific emotions: frustrated versus angry, disappointed versus sad, concerned versus anxious. Dr. Lisa Feldman. Barrett's research shows that people who can precisely identify emotions have better emotional regulation and make better decisions under stress. Use emotion wheels or apps that help you identify subtle emotional distinctions throughout your day. Practice negative visualization systematically, but constructively. Once weekly, spend 10 minutes imagining potential challenges in your current goals or relationships. Don't dwell on catastrophic scenarios, but mentally rehearse how you would respond optimally if difficulties occurred. Dr. Julie Norham's research shows that this practice reduces anxiety when problems actually arise and improves preparation quality for important endeavors. Develop meaning-making capacity through what Dr. Crystal Park calls meaning-focused coping. When facing setbacks or failures, practice asking, "What can this teach me? How might this redirect me towards something better? What character strengths am I developing through this experience?" This isn't forced positivity. It's training your brain to extract value from any experience, which research shows predicts better long-term outcomes than avoiding or minimizing difficulties. Create systematic self-compassion practices based on Dr. Kristin Neff's research. When you experience failure or criticism, practice talking to yourself the way you would encourage a good friend facing the same situation. Replace self-criticism with self-kindness, self-judgment with mindful awareness, and isolation with recognition of shared human experience. Studies show this single practice improves emotional regulation, motivation, and resilience more than almost any other intervention. Build your stress inoculation gradually through what researchers call progressive challenge. Each month, deliberately engage in activities slightly outside your comfort zone: public speaking, difficult conversations, physical challenges, or skill development in areas where you're not naturally talented. The key is calibrating challenge levels to stretch your capabilities without overwhelming them. Similar to progressive overload in physical training. Develop cognitive reappraisal skills through systematic perspective practice. When facing setbacks, practice generating multiple interpretations of the same event. This is teaching me something important. This is redirecting me toward a better path. This is building character strengths I'll need later. This is information about what to adjust in my approach. Dr. Kevin Oxner's research shows that people who can generate multiple perspectives handle stress better and recover faster from adversity. Create accountability systems through what Dr. Angela Duckworth calls commitment devices. Share your mental training goals with others who will support your growth. Use apps or journals to track your practice consistency, and regularly assess your progress in handling stress and maintaining perspective during challenges. Research shows that external accountability increases the likelihood of sustaining behavior changes over time. The elite also prioritize what researchers call recovery practices to maintain their mental training gains. This includes adequate sleep, which consolidates learning and emotional regulation. Regular physical exercise, which reduces stress hormones and builds stress tolerance. And social connection, which provides emotional support and perspective during difficult periods. Remember that building mental resilience is like developing physical fitness. It requires consistent practice over time, involves periods of challenge and recovery, and creates compound benefits that increase over years. The goal isn't to eliminate negative emotions or difficult circumstances. It's to develop sophisticated systems for navigating any experience while maintaining psychological equilibrium and optimal performance. The research consistently shows that these mental skills are more predictive of life satisfaction, career success, and relationship quality than intelligence, education, or natural talent. By systematically training your mind the way the elite do, you're not just improving stress management, you're optimizing human potential and building the psychological foundation for sustained high performance in any domain. Your unbreakable mind activation. The research is overwhelming. Mental resilience isn't a genetic lottery. It's a systematic practice that can be learned, developed, and mastered. The elite haven't achieved psychological strength through luck or natural talent. They've applied specific principles that neuroscience has now validated as the most effective methods for building what researchers call psychological hardiness and stress resilience. You now understand the 4 foundational pillars that separate elite minds from ordinary thinking. First, mastery of the dichotomy of control. Focusing 100% of your mental energy on what you can influence while accepting everything else as information. Second, sophisticated emotional regulation through cognitive reappraisal and stress inoculation, rather than emotion suppression or avoidance. Third, systematic negative visualization and mortality awareness to maintain perspective and build psychological immunity. Fourth, meaning-making capacity that transforms any experience into growth and learning rather than victimhood or helplessness. But understanding these principles intellectually isn't enough. The elite don't just know this information. They've systematically trained these skills until they become automatic responses. Dr. Anders Ericsson's research on deliberate practice shows that expertise in any domain requires approximately 10,000 hours of focused training. Mental resilience follows the same pattern. It requires consistent, intentional practice over time to create lasting change in how your brain processes stress and adversity. Your 30-day mental resilience challenge starts now. Week 1 focuses on implementing the dichotomy of control. Every morning, write down 3 things happening in your life right now. For each situation, identify specifically what you can control and what you cannot control. Throughout the day, when stress arises, immediately ask, "Is this within my control?" If yes, take action. If no, practice acceptance and redirect your energy to what you can influence. Week 2 emphasizes emotional regulation and reframing. When you experience negative emotions, practice Dr. Kevin Oxner's reappraisal technique. Ask yourself, what are 3 different ways I could interpret this situation? Generate alternative explanations that focus on growth, learning, or opportunity rather than threat or unfairness. This isn't denial of reality. It's training your brain to process experiences in ways that preserve psychological resources and enable optimal responses. Week 3 introduces systematic stress inoculation. Deliberately engage in activities slightly outside your comfort zone. Have a difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Try a skill you're not naturally good at, or take on a challenge that requires genuine effort. The key is calibrating stress levels to stretch your capabilities without overwhelming them. Notice how your tolerance for discomfort increases with practice. Week 4 implements meaning-making and perspective practices. Each evening, reflect on the day's experiences and extract lessons or insights from both positive and negative events. Ask, what did this teach me about myself or others? How might this experience benefit me or others in the future? What character strengths am I developing through this challenge? This trains your brain to find value in any experience, which research shows predicts better long-term outcomes than avoiding difficulties. The transformation won't happen overnight, but the research shows that consistent practice creates measurable changes in brain structure and function within weeks. Dr. Richard Davidson's neuroscience studies demonstrate that people who practice these mental skills show increased gray matter in areas associated with attention and emotional regulation. Decreased activity in brain regions linked to anxiety and rumination, and improved connectivity between prefrontal cortex and emotional centers. Most importantly, remember that building mental resilience isn't about becoming emotionless or invulnerable. It's about developing what psychologists call psychological flexibility, the ability to experience any emotion or situation while maintaining your capacity for wise action and authentic living. The elite haven't eliminated problems from their lives. They've developed sophisticated systems for navigating any experience while preserving their psychological resources and long-term effectiveness. Your unbreakable mind isn't built through avoiding adversity. It's forged through engaging with life's challenges using the same principles that have enabled the most successful people in history to thrive under pressure. The ancient Stoics understood what modern neuroscience has confirmed. Your mind is your most powerful tool. And like any tool, it becomes more effective with proper training and regular use. Start today. Choose one principle from this video and practice it consistently for the next week. Your future self, facing whatever challenges life brings, will thank you for building the psychological foundation that enables not just survival, but sustained excellence under any circumstances. The research has shown you the path. Now it's time to walk it.